either Manuel or Manuel. I'm not sure which pronunciation. I apologize. It's they, them. Coming from Brazil, calling from Rio de Janeiro. I want to challenge your views, says Manuel, on the issue of separation of church and state. We happen to have somebody here who can talk about that. So, Manuel, do I have your name right? And do I have your issue correct?
Yes, you have.
Great.
So I come in peace. I don't want to shout but anyway, it's kind of emotional. I do think that just by posing the question the way oftentimes it is posed, it's kind of US centric, and that is detrimental to you all only. Now, my point is this. Look, I do not want theocracy for anyone. I do not want anyone living under, a state that is also religious. That's bad. I also do not want people living under totalitarian states that are almost like a cult, like in North Korea or whatever. But I think the focus on laws, on lawsuits, and the formal aspect of it is not only not the important focus, it takes away the energy on what the real change needs to be. Brazil has very good laws. It's a state is secular, but if you go into any court of justice, there's a big cross there behind the judge. So
and you think that's a good thing?
I think that cross it does not belong there. But like homophobia is forbidden. It's a heinous crime like racism. However, murder is also a crime in Brazil. And 40% of trans women that are killed around the world are killed in Brazil. 40%. So
I'm gonna stop. We're going through a couple of points here. I really appreciate your points, but I want to stop at a thing you made. So you've made some claims here that it's an emotional issue, that you do not want a theocracy, that if you go into any court in Brazil, there will be a big cross there, and that you have good laws. To me, having a big cross at the place where you're supposed to have an impartial judge judging you potentially for crimes for which you might be punished, that doesn't seem the best situation. Do you think that the cross should be there? I think you said no. And then the next question is, well, if the cross shouldn't be there, how do you handle that, if not by petitioning the government to have it removed, which would be some sort of lawsuit?
Yeah, and I believe our Atheist Association here has done something about it. I'm not sure. But my point is that that's not the most important thing. The important thing is to realize people are being ordered to the point that some people think their lives are spendable. So
let me ask you a question. I understand that you're saying that there is a level of importance, right? And I think this goes back to the walk and chew gum at the same time sort of situation. If I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying that I don't want to put words in your mouth, but your argument's boiling down to stop worrying about the little stuff like which courtroom has a cross in it and start worrying about trans people being murdered. Now, to me, that's a logical fallacy because it's smuggling in a premise. And the premise you're smuggling in is you can't fight both fights at the same time. That's the premise that you're assuming is I can't have some people worrying about getting crosses out of courtrooms and other people fighting against the murder of trans people. Do you see my point there, that you can fight both of those fights at the same time?
Yeah, I totally agree, and I agree it was a fallacy, yes. But of course we can, and I do always point that out. Nobody seems to notice the fact that there's a big cross it's like part of the environment. It's like even atheists in Brazil have a hard time not believing in spirits and reincarnation. You know, like, oh yeah, I'm an atheist, but maybe there were past lives, and I go, what? Like, but that's not the thing. My point is, you can be an atheist and believe in other lives. I don't care. My point is ordering those who think different. Like, we need pluralism. So
I agree.
The fact that they are cross.
Let me. I think we take your point. I'd like to hear Ryan on this. Ryan, what are your thoughts on that? And also, have you ever studied the legal system in Brazil? I have not.
I have not either. So I'm anxious to hear any other details you have, because, you know, when you put two American lawyers on the show, yeah, it's going to be an American-centric premise. That's just you're stuck with that. But we're definitely interested in discussing it. One question that I have, or a possible pushback for your perspective, is when there is a huge cross in the courtroom, even if it's not something people think about. Like, to me, that's actually a red flag. You know, when it's something that it's so normal you don't even think about it. That to me is really alarming, that it's like it becomes so ingrained in your culture that you don't even stop to think about what the religious implication is. And one thing this can do that I think kind of connects the dots for you, you're saying that these two things are separate, right? On the one hand, there's like these symbolic state-church battles, and on the other hand, there's these very real-world problems that you're saying we ought to be focused on. But something that we've seen in the United States a lot is that the religious iconography gets used to create a permission structure to violate the second issue. So for instance, you know, in our case, we have our money says "In God We Trust" on it, and a Pledge of Allegiance says "One Nation Under God." And it's easy for, we hear a lot of our members say, can you please stop focusing on that? That's all symbolic. It's not important. Focus on stuff that matters. But the reality is, when we are having these important fights, and say, you know, for example, we're trying to protect LGBTQ rights, people will say, it says right there in Leviticus that homosexuality is an abomination. It says "In God We Trust" on your $1 bill. Why are you trying to defend this person? This is a Christian country. And so that's part of the issue that I think makes it worth fighting these battles, is when it becomes so ingrained in your culture that there is a Christian connection to the legal system. It makes it so much harder to fight these battles that you want to fight. So what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that maybe it's worth trying to separate? You know, you agree that the cross doesn't belong there. Do you agree that it's worth at least a little bit of effort to try to remove it if you could?
I'm not sure if we still have. Oh, there we go.
There are maybe many others, but we do not have those issues that you do. And if we did, I might be fighting to take that off. We as the US dollar is very valuable in Brazil, we say "In green we trust," because our money is all colorful. You know, yours is green. So anyway, my point is the following. We need a change from quarreling between two binary, you know, dichotomic points of views, and help people understand that we need to live in a plural society with many points of view. So, like, I would fight more to add other religious symbols besides that cross than to remove it. So in a way, I like what the Satanic Temple does there. Like, I think they also focus a lot on you know, making a suing but if you read their invocation, you understand why that's not just plain it's not just for fun. It's a state.
Yeah, no, they are doing very serious work. We should
important.
probably explain for our audience that that the Satanic Temple that he's referring to are people who actually make a point. And Ryan, I don't know if you've ever worked with them or experienced them, but the common pattern is some locality decides to have a display somewhere as sponsored by the local government or on government space, and they put up some manger or a cross or something. And because of lawyers like you, and because we've been fighting this fight for 200 years, and because we came to an agreement back when we signed the Constitution, you either need to not do that at all, or at least everybody participate and not censor anybody based on the content of their speech. So Satanic Temple comes in and wants to put in a giant goat statue or honoring Satan or something like that just to make a point. Have you ever run into their work?
Yeah, absolutely. We work with them quite a bit. We have joked when we take lawsuits with them that we are being the devil's advocate, quite literally. But yeah, they sometimes approach state church issues differently than we do, but they do what they do very effectively, very well. And so, yeah, lots of respect for them. They are achieving a lot of good. I do think that there's a danger, and there absolutely could be cultural differences that change this calculation, Manuel. So between Brazil and the United States, it just might be good strategy here, bad strategy there. But in the United States, at least, there's a situation where the reality is, if you have what we call an open forum where everyone is allowed to put everything up, it is always going to be just completely dominated by Christianity, and Christian lawmakers are counting on that. That's why they open these open forums, and they know that if history is any guide, when you show up and have a non-Christian perspective, maybe they'll let one token Jewish perspective in, but if you bring in anything else, you are usually going to get run out of town. It depends on where you are, of course. Some places are much more tolerant than others, but in a lot of places in like the Bible Belt and whatnot, you can actually be in physical danger if you show up and you say, I'm going to be, if you're Sikh or you're Hindu, you're Muslim, you're going to, or atheist, absolutely. And maybe the Satanic Temple is the just exaggerated version of that, where people who are otherwise tolerant of other religious views will often just lose their minds when the Baphomet goat head statue shows up. So what tends to happen is, as soon as the Christian lawmakers realize that they don't get their way and that they have to actually put non-Christian symbols on government property, what they do is they turn around and close the forum. They say, never mind, we don't want any religious symbols anymore. And so this kind of gets back to our point where we're saying this is what we've been asking for the entire time, that just keep all the religion symbols out of it. And it sounds to me like you agree that's the best solution. You're just advocating for saying, if instead of fighting tooth and nail for that, let's just let everything in. And I would only push back to say, I think that's a distant second best solution. It's much better to just keep it secular. It's also better for religion. You don't want if you're a Christian, you shouldn't want your cross to be part of government iconography that people look at in the courthouse and just say, oh yeah, it's just the cross, no one cares about that. It's supposed to be the center of your entire worldview, so you're really cheapening it.
Correct. Yes. And I want to thank Manuel. I'm going to go ahead and let him go. I agree with you, Ryan, and I also agree with him. I agree with him to the extent of, I agree that the crosses shouldn't be there. And I agree that if they're around long enough, they become background noise. But what happens when you propose removing them? All of a sudden, there's a giant fight. And there's a reason that there's a fight. Because if it really didn't matter, then everybody would shrug and be like, you know what? Yeah, sure, go ahead. We could save a few bucks. We wouldn't have to put a cross in every courtroom. Excuse me. But as soon as you want to change that, all of a sudden you have a big fight. And I am also going to call out again what you pointed out, Ryan, that there's not necessarily a disconnect between the fact that you have a cross in every courtroom and that you claim to lead the world in killing trans people. That did not go past my notice. Let's put it that way. So I want to thank you, Manuel, for calling. I agree with Ryan that I think the fight is important enough to make at every level, because, and one might call this a slippery slope argument. You might get accused of this sometimes, Ryan, but my cold open is exactly what I'm talking about, right? We have let people who believe that this is a Christian nation dictate who is making the rules for the last X number of years, and we now have a super religious Supreme Court who is clearing away obstacles for a theocracy. I don't think they literally think they are going to bring about a Christian state, but I don't think that they haven't not thought about it. I think that they did away with the lemon test. They did all the things I cited, got rid of Roe while not a strictly religious case. And there's reasons why you can say Roe is a bad case. It is indicative of their agenda and why people are bringing these cases now. And they're letting people pray, and they're letting governments starting to pay for education. And that brings me back to the final point about the cross that you were talking about. Jeff, I said this last time we were on. I wish you were on last time I hosted. We had a caller who asked a lot of questions about the separation of church and state in a way that made me think he was skeptical of it. And I had to give him lots of examples, including Jefferson's act in Virginia against religious, whatever it was. I forget the name of the act at the moment, where he made a very good point, which is the government taking money from you and giving it to a Christian preacher is bad, even if you're a Christian, because you may not agree with all of the interpretations and the preaching of the Christian preacher the government chooses. So just like in Louisiana years ago when they tried to make the Bible the official book of Louisiana and then had to abandon it because they couldn't figure out which version of the Bible to use because of infighting, which cross are they using in the courtroom in Brazil, and when is that fight going to come along?
Absolutely. And the other point for people who are into history of these state church issues is James Madison's memorial and remonstrance against religious assessments is all about the same points, where he's saying even a tiny tax in order to support religious instruction is fundamentally un-American. And you see the same thing too with, to echo your point about choosing which version of the Bible is correct. You saw this also in Louisiana and other states where they were wanting to put the 10 Commandments up. And it's this funny thing, random tangent. And I know you and I have talked about this before. 11 commandments. There's 11 of them. It's so funny. And it's like, how clear is it that this was decided by committee when you're trying to decide which version of the 10 Commandments and you end up with 11. So I've always said they should, the opponents should request that they either change it to say the 11 commandments, or you just number them. So you say the 10 commandments, then it goes 1 to 11. But yeah, anyway.
Importantly, in the bill, they say, here's what you need to display, the 10 commandments, and then they just list them without numbering them, which is hilarious. I had to literally go 1, 2, 3. Oh no, that's 2 lines. That's 2, 3, 4, 5. It's like something out of a Terry Gilliam movie like Brazil or some just absurdist idea of they fight so hard, and then when everybody's like not looking and they finally get away with it for a little bit, then they're in the room by themselves and they actually have to do something like, oh fuck, what do we do now?
Yeah. Exactly. And I love your point too, by the way, just a last thought on that call, that, if you think that you're in an area where these things don't matter, right? Where it's like he's in Brazil, someone might be in California, or someone say, we don't really have state church problems here. Try getting In God We Trust removed, or try getting an invocation removed. And it's like turning a rock over and seeing all the bugs crawl out. It's just like they will remind you why they want this in the government. And you're going to say, oh, actually, there is a real state church issue here.
Yes. And this was all added during the Red Scares when we had Under God added to the pledge, and we had there's a history of In God We Trust being on the money and off the money and on the money and off the money again. And every time when you go back and read the legislative debates, there are people there assuring everybody to stop freaking out. Nobody is ever going to argue that this is a Christian nation simply because the pledge says under God and because the money says In God We Trust. And then fast forward to exactly where they knew we would be at this point, which is you have to educate friends and family and anybody growing up to say, that wasn't always here. That was just added because people were terrified of communists. And they're like, no way. And then you try to take it off. And I've seen church signs, they put the little witty sayings on the lit up church signs. You drive by them. In God We Trust, it's on our money. Like it is a regularly cited thing. And it's all because back in the day, people were scared and they let people sort of bend the rules regarding the First Amendment. And now it's just like the cross in Brazil courtrooms. It's just always there. And when you try to take it away, people freak out.
And when you try, if you talk to the people who are moderates about this, right, people who are kind of like, you know, this is just a nod to our Christian heritage.
Right.
And it doesn't mean anything. I'm not trying to make a theocracy. Even if they're being honest about that, they are giving support to the scary, genuine Christian nationalists out there who are saying, look, you know, 50% of the nation is on my side. There's that church sign right there pointing out that we're a Christian country by saying God we trust on the money. You know, so it's like, I think it's important that we be honest about this. And just if you're not on board for theocracy and for Christian nationalism, you should be on board for state church separation and just say, no, actually the atheists are right about this. Even if you want to appreciate things like our Christian heritage, you can still say the right thing to do is just to keep the government secular.
Yeah, it's no skin off your back. And unfortunately, they don't like that answer because nothing upsets a U.S. Christian fundamentalist more than seeing a Muslim give the opening prayer to Congress. Like the minute that happens is, as you said, it's just another version of opening up the town square and having the Baphomet statue go up. Nothing freaks them out more than that. It's not important until you try to include other cultures, then it's game over.
Exactly.
We have super chats. We've had a lot of super chats. We also have a lot of calls. So I'm going to try to go through the super chats first. But Ryan, you're a very popular person, so we got to get to the calls too. Rainbow Wolf gave $4.99 and said, if I don't need a God to not murder or not rape, but an apologist does, then it's not I who lacks a moral compass or foundation. I couldn't agree more. Do you ever run into that, Ryan, where people are like, well, if you're an atheist, what's preventing you from going out and like killing everybody?
Yeah, I think most people are a little more nuanced now because they've heard the just slap in the face rebuttal to that, where it's like, yeah, I kill everybody I want to, and that number is zero.
Right? Yeah. Who said that? Was that Penn? I think.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Penn Jillette. Yeah, that is such a great quote. I kill as many people as I want to.
Yeah, that's exactly perfect.